Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for joining us this week. It's been a very exciting week. We will touch on some current events in just a second here, but we really wanted to get into the Catholic Church today and get into some of the discussions about that and a new science thing. But with all the current events that happened over the weekend, we had to take a few minutes to have a conversation about that. But before we even get to that, we have to bring on our guest host for the night, Boyce from Mindful Skeptics Podcast. How are you tonight, sir?
Well done, Chris. Well done. Doing good.
Yeah, it's a running joke for Boyce and I, because I think about a month and a half ago, I accidentally made his podcast called the Mindless Skeptics Podcast, and then I didn't catch it until after we went through the editing process and all of that, and it basically was already up and aired and downloaded, so it was a little too late to go back and edit that out.
Yep.
But
good times.
Anyway, how are you tonight, boys?
Doing all right, man. It's a beautiful day out. I can't complain.
Yeah, it's cooling off a little bit finally in Michigan. We might be able to see the end of this climate change nightmare that we've been going through, but we'll see. I don't know. You know, it's kind of one of those things as we continue to go through these changes. You know, I've said this before. It almost feels like our seasons are shifting. So, you know, we go from this discussion where we're, 80, 90 degrees in July to the end of July is 80, 90. August is 80, 90. And then September is when it'll start to cool off, which is just a little bit opposite from what it was doing before.
Yeah, it's like a 30 to 60 day shift.
Exactly. And that's kind of the thing is when we talk through these different things and look at it, people that don't understand climate change are going to immediately just deny it and brush it off. But this is some evidence for, global warming. And maybe, Moise, maybe we should do a show about that in a couple of weeks or something like that. Maybe that'd be fun to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
We haven't done one in like a year. Hannah and I, for a while, we were doing something on climate change every week, and then we said, no, we gotta stop. We gotta stop bombarding people. And then it was guns, and now maybe we should go back to climate change. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, for tonight, obviously the first topic we wanted to talk about was a suicide, and normally we wouldn't talk about suicide per se, right? But this one yesterday has been all over the internet in terms of how how he has disappeared, right? And some people, I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory, but I don't not want to call it a conspiracy theory. We should see what our options are, but we should stop jumping to conclusions. But there's a lot of rigmarole that's going around about this. And essentially, people are claiming that it's conspiracy theory. What do you think, boys?
Well, people are claiming it's a hit, to cover up his dirty deeds. And to me, the reason I get suspicious of this is because typically in a typical jail environment, not a downtown Manhattan penthouse jail, if you attempt suicide, you're put on suicide watch. And you're put in a suicide suit, which means you're naked, and you're only covered up with a burlap sack type of material that can't be shredded and used to hang yourself with. And you're under 24 hours surveillance. They will not let you kill yourself. It's illegal.
Yeah.
Don't mind that you break laws, but it's still illegal to kill yourself. And so he was allowed enough time to kill himself or someone to do it. So either way, it was poorly handled. And jails have hush money where people are paid to look the other way. Jeffrey Dahmer was killed under the same type of circumstances where he was in general population for 2 weeks, and he got killed by inmates because the inside was paid to look the other way, and no one ever was convicted of that either. So I'm a little suspicious of that. I'm a little skeptical of it just being a natural suicide. But both sides are going to blame each other as the co-conspirator.
Yeah. And my big thing here, right, though, and the reason I'm just going to chalk it up to a suicide. And if the investigation comes out and there's a lot more information, then I'll be happy to, recant my stance. But, so for anybody who doesn't know, Jeff Epstein basically has been accused of child trafficking girls for the last 50 years, basically. And I guess 50 years is an exaggeration, but
yeah, of minors.
Yeah, minor. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so if you look at, I'll be honest, if you look at the history, they don't always put all these people on suicide watch, right? He technically was not on suicide watch when he killed himself. So, whether it's an oversight or something that should have happened, I don't maybe disagree with that. But I really don't think it's a bunch of people trying to cover up what he knows. Because if you look at it this way, all that stuff's on hard drives. All that stuff's out there and accessible to everybody at some point. At some point, we're going to get all of this information. And, for example, a lot of people are claiming Trump this, Trump that. But it's probably not the Trump Corporation, right? Because in fairness, Trump hasn't had any contact with them in over like 10 years or something like that or more. Clinton actually has. But now it's going to open up this whole Pizzagate discussion again, which I don't even want to go down that road. And that's why I'm going to say, let's avoid the conspiracy theories for now. Let's accept what has happened and hope that if it is something that is under the table, that the FBI, especially because they are now investigating this, can take care of and look at in a whole different light. And maybe they'll tell us something did happen and we'll have to come back here and have a conversation about it.
Yeah. And people, and we're Americans, we think everything's about us, but there's also international things involved with him too. We had foreign dignitaries at his island, his little pedophile island. So
exactly,
they can't blame it on Bush or Trump or Clinton Foundation, whatever, all the memes going around.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, I'm going to be reserved and say, I'm not going to worry about it. Some conspiracy for now. I am excited that they've released all these documents, that can now be used against him, even though he's not around. And that doesn't mean there's not other people involved in this, right? Maybe he's the one that got caught, and maybe he was the mastermind. But there's lots of other networks and things, and all this is going to do is allow us to try and find those networks, take care of them, so that we don't have the same issues in such prominence that we have right now,
Yeah, he definitely was not a one-man show, and to get access to these minors, someone had to bring them to him. He's not like he's out there in the streets snatching people up.
No,
someone was recruiting these children and making them sex slaves, pretty much. And so I think more needs to be looked into it. Of course, who's his co-conspirators? They can still be held accountable.
They can, and that's what I'm hoping comes out of this. I'm hoping they can shut this down, and it will no longer be something that we have to, have a conversation about in terms of did he or did he not get killed. Hopefully, it'll be a discussion about how do we prevent these things going forward in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense to kill yourself if you're him.
Exactly. Oh, well, anyway, I'm sure we'll have more conversations about that in the very near future.
I'll say it'll take a year.
It'll take a year or more. It'll take, but justice is slow. It is what it is.
Yep.
One of the other things I wanted to touch on tonight or talk about was the family. And we won't get really super far into this, but I think this kind of talks about the last topic. And we're not going to spend a lot of time. So for those of you who are listening and never heard of this, The Family is a Netflix show that kind of talks about how Christianity may be funding and super involved with politics. And there's a lot more evidence to this than there is that Jeff Epstein was killed, and hence why they have a documentary about it. And I recommend anybody who has not seen it to actually go out and watch it and then get together and do a bunch of research. And you can send us your research to our show. I mean, I'd be more than happy to take a look at it. But I think that in the future, that'll be an episode on Boyce's show that he's going to go into extreme detail once he finishes the series. But if you have not seen The Family, it is one of the most disturbing documentaries you're going to see in a while.
Yeah, definitely disturbing and unsettling is a good word, because it makes you think, okay, is all of this being controlled by these, less than 100 people, really? That's scary.
Exactly. And I kind of actually had discredited this, before, right? I just was like, I'm not going to watch this, not going to watch this. And then, the preview comes up and you're like, yeah, maybe I am going to watch this.
Yeah. It's too good to not watch. I'm in episode 4 right now, so I'm pretty close to being done with it too.
Yeah. And depending on what they do will depend on if they have more series or anything like that. And I posted a link to a Rolling Stones article if you want to go through and listen to it. But essentially, there is a book by author Jeff Charlotte, and essentially they turned that into this documentary episodic series or whatever that talks about basically the secret Christian, cult that is trying to run the United States.
Mm-hmm. And it's all about Jeebus.
Yeah, I mean, and the funny thing is too, and I guess this there's a spoiler, it's episode 1, but they basically hand them a Bible that's stripped out except for Jesus, and it's just the stuff that talks about Jesus. And that's actually a really popular movement among a lot of more liberal Christians, right? Because it takes out all the weird stuff, all the things you're like, that's not what I want to look into, because, God wouldn't do those things and all the contradictions. And let's just focus on Jesus, because everything changes with him. And
it's just cherry picking 101.
Well, you're right. Yeah, you're right. It is. But a lot of people have ways, and there is some decent arguments around how to look at it like that, right? Mm-hmm. There is.
Well, it's more humanistic.
Yeah. And it's just kind of crazy because of the fact that, I never would have thought that this inside group would have focused solely on that, but they do. They focus like almost immensely just on that small section of the Bible, and yet they're able to convince enough people to buy into their ideology.
Well, and I think it's said in that book, it's just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the first 4 apostles, the book of the apostles. And I think there's
Acts.
The book of Acts, and then there's one more they've made up apparently, or kind of summarized with or something. It's not really in the Bible. And so it's a very short book. That tells you how wicked the dang Bible really is. Take out all the bullshit. You're left with 5 books, and you got to make up a 6th one.
Yeah. And actually, if anybody knows where to get their hands on one of those, I actually would like a copy of one, just because I would like to go through it, be able to see it. So if anybody listening knows how to get one, send an email to cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Let me know. I'll be happy to give you credit on the show. I'll be happy to pay for the stupid thing. I don't care. I would like to see a copy of this somehow. And
absolutely.
I've not been able to find one that looks exactly like what they have on the show.
Mm-hmm. I will have to dig deep for that one. That's very interesting.
Yeah. It would be fun. It would be a fun read. Maybe we'll read it and make fun of it on the air. I don't know. Yeah.
I could do a whole YouTube series. I just read that book word for word, one episode for one chapter,
Can I sit in the background and snicker every time? Like, it'll just be you reading. I'll play some epic music, and then I'll snicker, on and off. And we could do it at night where I can drink, and then I'll be there in the background, and the drunker I get, the more, I'm going to start calling it out.
No, to hell, let's get some shrooms and some edibles, and let's do this the right way. Let's just check out altogether.
We could do that too. That would be crazy. So.
We gotta go to Colorado for that, though.
Yeah, they gotta go to Colorado, not here.
Yeah. Yep.
So another thing that I've been looking into that I thought was very worthwhile discussing, and this is kind of this is a discussion about science, right? Because I really wanted to do more science segments The time I've spent researching has all gone into this specific topic. And the difference is that they have this headline, and it's hilarious, and it's a couple weeks old, but it says, "Yellow is not the new black. Discovery paves way for a new generation of solar cells." And the reason I find this very intriguing is not just specifically because, solar energy is going to be the new thing, right? We're running a lot of things on solar, even though Trump doesn't want us to. It's because they're looking to continue doing things differently, to absorb the sunlight differently, to store it differently, to make it more usable and more efficient and even less wasteful than what it currently is. And I don't know, boys, I don't know if you have done any research on solar energy, or if you have solar energy at your house or your work or anything. But you can get into solar panels and different things relatively cheaply. You can still get the tax credit for it for your house, and it will save you. My brother-in-law actually is basically paying $15-20 a month tops for his electricity bill. So yeah, he's already paying back what he invested in his solar setup.
Yeah, and that's something. There's a guy over in Valparaiso named Emmett Muckles. He's also a podcaster, but that's what he does. He installs solar. That's all he's doing right now is he's training people, and he's going all in on this renewable energy. He thinks that's the future. And this article shows how it's going to be even more efficient, which makes it more cost effective, which will bring down the price, increase demand, basic market stuff. And so if right now it costs, say, $2,500 to get a solar panel that produces X amount of gigawatts, whatever the hell whatever the measurement is, then it may double it for half the price, so it should be exponential savings. And I don't see why every business, especially government building, doesn't have solar on the roofs to start with. Yeah.
I don't know either, other than, people are just super resistant to change.
Yeah.
So the new type of, they're crystals, they're man-made, they're not going to align your chakras. You don't have to worry about that. But they are able to convert sunlight into electricity. And I'm going to say this word, and I'm sure it's going to be butchered, and boys can correct me, but it's perovskites. That's how I pronounce it. It's Perovskites. Perovskites.
No, it's probably perovskites.
There you go. See, it's better. Perovskites.
Yeah, roughly.
But they're a new conducting material that essentially will convert sunlight into electricity, and it's highly stable. So it's not something that, it's not like nuclear energy where you have to have all this, environmental gain and waste, and you have to be very careful. This one is non-affecting of the environment. It can absorb more than before. And they're talking about how they're going to be able to use them in new solar panels. So, boys, have you heard anything about this material at all?
Yeah, it's the big thing is that it's flexible. So like the solar panels are very, very delicate right now, and they're working on the you put them on your roof, and they got to be resistant to high impact because of falling debris and hail and whatnot. But this is shown to be a lot more malleable and easier to maintain its structure if it's a little bit flexible, so it can take a hit and kind of bounce back to its original black form, they call it. So yeah, I read this article. It's pretty cool how the black to yellow gives it that flexibility.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and the funny thing is this mineral that essentially makes, that they use was discovered in Russia back in the 1800s. That's crazy, right? So this stuff has been around. How did you say it again?
Oh gosh, let me look at the word. It's a pretty
perovskite. Perovskittles. We're going to call it perovskittles. But however you say this wording, essentially, damn it, you're supposed to be the Hannah of the show. I cannot pronounce words to save my life. But essentially the general formula for this is it has oxygen at the center, at the edge of the centers, right? So that's what's helping some of that become flexible, and it allows, like you said, for the impact, for the changing, basically for the mineral to somewhat morph into different, sizes to absorb and release, which is just crazy. I mean, just to think of the whole thing in and of itself,
Well, I like how this has really got a big thing for glass application too, to put on a thin film on top of glass with heat and cooling. So think about all your windows could become solar energy cells.
Yeah. That would be crazy,
could replace
right?
all the skyscrapers in the world. Every building could have this, and we would ultimately become the greenest goddamn thing you've ever seen in this country. We would not need electricity produced at a nuclear plant and as high of a rate, and also, using the fossil fuels to generate power as well.
Yeah. So there's an article from Science that actually talks about the whole study. So it is, I think you can get it. I don't think it's behind a paywall. Oh, yeah, it is. The actual full article is behind a paywall if you want to read the Science article behind it. But the other article that actually we found that talks about it is it's a combination of scientists from different countries. So it's not just one scientist saying, I'm going to do this whole thing, which is usually what it's not. But Dr. Julian Steele of the KU Levin Center for Membrane Separations University, right? That individual is spearheading this, right? And they basically are saying that, the way that this material works, right? The way that the cells are working, you can heat it up to a certain temperature, and then it'll, like it says, it'll expand, it'll adhere to glass, and then it'll rapidly cool down, to the room temperature. And because supposedly the way the oxygen, is formed inside of this crystal, that's what's actually allowing it to move and constrict and all these other things that it's doing,
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, which is interesting because, you were saying, hey, this could be on glass. Well, because of how it bonds, it can bond to almost anything. The only thing I think that it would probably have problems with is like the Middle East, or if global warming gets too warm, and all of a sudden we see all these crystals falling off buildings and stuff like that.
Black rain.
Yeah, it reminds the picture of it reminds me of dark matter from Futurama. That's what it looks like, in the Wikipedia picture. But they talk about, they basically talk about how, because of the flexibility, how it can transfer. So if you think about it, if you can absorb more sunlight, so if the cost of this, and they don't have costs in here or anything like this, but if your costs are the same as they are for right now for solar panels, but it can absorb, let's just say 3 times the amount of sunlight, you would be able to store more electricity for your house, to the point where, we could set it back where you're giving back to energy stations. And that's, for me, that's the biggest thing here. Like, I had a friend who owned a blueberry farm, right? And 9 years ago, when Obama first started offering these tax credits, he bought into it, turned his farm into a solar farm, and then did his blueberry stuff. Not only was he getting paid back from the utility companies, where he was making money on it. So his first year he broke even, second year he broke even, third year he made $10,000 just for his farm of selling the energy back, right? Now, can you imagine if we all did this? If everybody, you could get a grant, and maybe instead of us getting $10,000 a year, right, we would get $300 a year or $500 a year. But if we were all donating our energy back, then the energy companies could redistribute that energy, right, and give it to people that don't have the money to invest.
That was going to be my main point, was all of us as homeowners could become suppliers of energies for those that don't. And we could become the energy grid, not the government.
Exactly.
As far as, like we could all become an energy grid and, again, drive down the cost significantly, and not just let's say you get $300 a year back, but you're also not paying for electricity. Mm-hmm. So the savings is in the tens of thousands for some people with bigger homes or whatever, or if they have a central air or whatever, furnace, all that stuff that saves money.
Yeah. During the summer, when I used to have central air, my bill was $300 every month for almost 5 months, just because of the house, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't have central air anymore. We just have window air unit. And my electricity bill is $150 a month typically. Sometimes 200 depending on when it gets really warm, right? But the insanity side of that is, even at that, even if I'm paying $2,400 a year, if you could cut your bill down to nothing, and then you were able to say, hey, think about it. That $2,400 you didn't have to pay is money you put in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and maybe you'll buy more cost-efficient stuff than all of a sudden energy-efficient stuff where shit, everything's going to become. Then you can get maybe a wind turbine.
You could. I could actually then afford to pay the monthly payment on a hybrid. I could do that, right? You know, at $2,400 a year savings, I could afford then to get a more fuel efficient car. You know,
Get you a Tesla.
My son would love that. If I got a Tesla, my son would just be ecstatic. I actually, driving back and forth to Wisconsin, I called the company to try and see if somebody had one to rent just for a week. Like, I just want to rent one for 1 week. But
I'm thinking about doing an episode where I'm going to reach out to Southwest Michigan and say, okay, is there anyone that I know in my friend group that knows someone that has a Tesla and would be willing to let me come and sit with them and do a YouTube video of what's it like to actually own the car, how efficient is it, and how much of a hassle is the charging right now with our current technology, and kind of get a real world perspective from a normal person just lives in small town USA where you only got like maybe 3 charging stations in the whole county to see, is it really worth the hassle? Have you ever ran out of energy and what happens? You know, like I have a lot of questions. But I looked on Tesla right now. You can get the absolute cheapest Tesla for $32,000.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And that rivals a Honda right there. I mean, just like, you know, again, if you're going to buy a cheaper car like a Kia or something like that, it obviously doesn't. But for a Honda, it rivals a Honda, no questions asked.
Well, especially a hybrid.
Yeah.
You're talking closer to $40,000 for like a Toyota, a Honda Accord or a Toyota Camry hybrid. I have a coworker got one for $42,000. And it was not loaded. It's expensive.
Yep. And I think because I have to upgrade my electricity in my house at some point. I think when I do that, I'm just going to see if how much it would cost for them to put a charging station in my garage anyway, just so it's there. Not that maybe I'll never use it. But if it's only an extra $500 to $1,000 to put one there, why not do it? Because it's just going to make the resale of my house worth even more at some point.
Absolutely. I think geothermal is another big one for heating a house and cooling a house. It produces electricity. It has a backup electric grid that powers you in case you lose power to the geothermal unit. If it fails, you still have a backup. It's like a big toaster. It looks like a big metal grids, you know, and it heats up the air and the water. But yeah, I think geothermal is another big one we should be looking at long term in this country for furnace replacements too.
Oh yeah. Yep. And I agree with you. You know, my house is ran on water, right? You know, we use water to heat our house, but that's just because I have a boiler and that's the way the house is set up.
Yeah, that's old school right there, buddy.
It is. But I tell you what, even with my water bill, it's still cheaper than a lot of people think. You know, it is a lot cheaper.
Well, the cost of propanes went up so much that it's forced people to invest in different technology because propane had just gotten ridiculous.
Yeah, it has. You know, and it's some of that's nice, right? You know, some of that's nice that they're forcing a change. I wish though that it would be a different type of change, and that the change wouldn't have to come because the cost of something goes up. It should come because people want to invest. And the only other way to do that is to start offering some sort of government subsidies or tax evasion or something like that they are able to use to help people that can't afford it. You know, like I can't go invest $20,000 right now in a solar setup. But if somebody's like, hey, I'm going to give you free financing, it's going to be $100 a month, here you go.
Yeah.
I would do it.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, that's something I thought about too is, you know, the government's in bed with Ford for all their police cars right now.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere, or at least around in Michigan, it's all Ford. And I believe I'm not sure if it's national. I'm not sure how that works, but I know in Michigan, everything's a Ford. Ford Explorer, Ford, what is oh no, they have Dodge cars too, the state cops. But let's say they got to sign contracts with all these different providers for the best price. What if the state and federal government said, to hell with it, let's go Tesla, let's replace all of our cars with Tesla cars, which would require the police station to get charging units, and they'd be motivated to get wind and solar at the police stations.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a huge infrastructure investment on as a society to say, okay, that's it. No more gas guzzling Explorers. Let's get Teslas. They're faster and they're safer. And there's so many things that distract the police while they're driving as well, but they're good at it. That's what they do. But I mean, Tesla is one of the safer cars, and no one can run away from a Tesla car. That son of a bitch is fast. Like it's just a superior vehicle. But I think if we have a government can say, okay, Elon Musk, what can we do about this? Can you give us a month of just give us every car for a month? Just bam. And let's start replacing start with the CIA and the FBI or whatever, federally, or just start with one state at a time and slowly say, okay, a state like California that has the infrastructure already for charging stations, and they're already big on solar and low emissions. This checks all the boxes in California, which has the strictest emissions, and clean energy as far as the cars go. So let's take a place like California that might be more receptible to it, and just say, okay, replace all the government-owned vehicles with Teslas, and go from there.
Yeah,
that'd be a hell of a move in my eyes. In Boyce's world,
I would agree. Yeah, I think that would be. And you could just pick one county in California if you wanted, and to test it out, and then look at the savings over 6 months and say, okay, this is what a rough savings estimate is. What would happen if we did this?
Yeah, or even a smaller state like, say, Delaware. Say, okay, state and county, all of it's going to be 100% Tesla, and it's a lower upfront cost of solar or wind. It depends on where you're at too, because wind might be more helpful up in the Northwest than solar because of the storms and the cloud cover. But both of those can really generate enough. They're getting a lot better with them too. So, but the solar has the most upside, I think.
I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you aren't interested in solar yet, this new technology is not out. It is not out yet, but it will be out at some point, I believe, in the near future. And all it will do is, if we can get to this, then we can spend more of our time as a society focusing on what we want to talk about for the last topic tonight.
Yeah.
So for the last topic for the night, there was an article that came out end of July, and it didn't seem to get as much traction on Facebook as this whole Jeff Epstein suicide thing has. But this is very important, and this is kind of goes into when we talked about the family and the secret Christian underground, we'll call it a conservatorium, right? Where these people are working together to change things. There's been that same current running alongside of the Catholic Church for years and years and years. And while we want to call the family out and we want to call these things out, there's the same thing that's happening in the Catholic Church, except for there is a nonprofit group called Opus Bono Scaridoti. And essentially, it is a lawyer group that helps priests who have been accused of sexually harassing, sexually molesting, basically anything sexual to children. And they take them and they help them, all these clergy members, basically either try and get the best consequences they can get out of the situation. They help relocate them, and they also support them with legal support throughout the whole country.
Yes.
Now, I didn't even know this existed. I'll be honest. That's crazy, right?
And it's in our state of Michigan.
Yes.
How the hell?
Exactly. Where did this come from? But this Opus Bono essentially has existed for since the 50s, right? And whenever a priest admits to sexually assaulting a boy, Opus Bono raises funds for their defense, right? So they're going on behalf of the specific priest in question, And they're helping them as legal advisors, as paying for them. And instead of people inside of the church saying, hey, we shouldn't be using them, this is hugely promoted, right?
Yes. Yeah, if you're accused of something, they protect you. You become part of the system to protect the rest. It's just huge snowball. You almost become a witness, expert witness. It helped me fondle boys and not go to jail. It can help you too, infomercial.
And these are some very long articles. I'll tell you ahead of time, some of the articles in there, and they can be triggering. There is some things in here that you're going to go, I can't believe they did these things.
Yeah.
But they do.
Yeah.
So what they started to do is they started to look at different interviews, different people. They started to talk through these different situations. And our recent attorney general in Michigan essentially is starting to force the issue to say, hey, what about Opus? And are they misusing funds? Are they misleading contributors? Are they doing anything illegally? Because it's not wrong that priests deserve representation. I don't actually disagree with that. I think they should get representation. The problem is that this group here has flown so far under the radar that none of us have really heard of them. They've never been a big thing, but yet all the Catholic Church is doing is utilizing this specific group to do what they want, to try and get away with things.
Yeah, and like you said, this is a long article, but it's a lot of good information and good testimonies of like, this parishioner did this, and they took him out of that area and they put him in Florida. Then he gets accused in Florida. They bring him up to Michigan. They put him in an unmarked house, and they provide him with assets to live his life as if nothing happened and protect him from the law, really.
Yeah. They had a priest called Perron, right? And this person is one they bring up in the article, right? And I don't even think he should be a reverend, and I don't think he is anymore. But essentially, he has admitted to molesting children. But because of the statute of limitations, he can't go to jail. And so this group is helping him relocate, helping him so that people don't knock on his door and try and burn him out of his house.
Why aren't we... I don't know enough about the legal system, honestly, and I hope some listeners do, and they can email you and let us know. But why is the statute of limitations applied to some crimes and not others, and why isn't this one of those?
I don't know. That's good. That's a good question, boys. It's one of those where I have no idea who makes that decision. But you would think that the statute of limitations should not pertain to child molesters or rapists or anything.
Yes. Yeah, it seems so logical to say, we don't care if you were 24 and now you're 84. You was diddling little boys. You're gonna have to pay. It just doesn't make sense.
Yep. In 2002, Detroit police charged him with sexually assaulting a member of the choir at one of the Catholic churches. The 48-year-old petitioner who accused this priest of rape said that the response from Perron, essentially the guy that we were talking about, was to protect the church, testifying in court to just walk away and ignore him. So they have a whole nother priest, and I'm not even gonna Han James or something like that.
Oh yeah. That West African clergyman.
Yeah, and who basically was doing similar things, and they basically said, hey, don't worry about it, just ignore them. Right? That's crazy. Anybody that would say this, so you got to protect the church. So essentially, they're saying their belief set, their church set, is more important than the safety of children or women or I guess any parishioner inside of that church. So how can you even go to a church if you can't feel safe? Right? Isn't that the whole point of this ideology? Is that you get to go here, you get to feel safe, you get to have all these things that they talk to you about, in the Bible, but yet you don't get them.
Yeah, it's a weird sense of community in that aspect where instead of him facing civil repercussions, he's faced with shunning within the church. I mean, come on, man. It's like saying, I'm going to allow a thief in my house for the rest of my life, even though they're a meth head thief. I'm going to act like they're not there and expect them not to steal something. Get real.
There was another parishioner called Joe Maynor, right? and he took this priest into his house to live, to basically hide him, essentially, right? And he had a daughter. He had a daughter who was living with him at the time.
That's sick.
Yeah.
I mean,
now,
how blind you got to be and loyal.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And again, in this day and age, it's a lot easier to find convictions, a lot easier for evidence. But, back in the day, you couldn't do any of those things. You didn't have similar DNA testing. We didn't have as many cameras everywhere, And again, they're moving these people to halfway houses is what they call them, right? Which is hotels, apartments. They're moving people around so often, so it's easy to lose track of them. So if authorities don't get involved right away, there's no way that they can start getting convicted. Because again, if you think about it, if you're a reverend in Michigan, you get caught, they move you out. Yep. Where are they going to find you?
Yep.
That's crazy, right? Their website lauders 8,000 priests that they've helped. 8,000.
So that man, that's a crazy number to think of how many they've assaulted in their career, which could be as few as a few years and as many as 60 years of assaults that have been not undetected, but unreported outside the church's canon, the church law. It's like a again, this is why I think the Catholic Church specifically, with regards to the Pope and all of them at the Vatican, should be reclassified as a criminal organization that specializes in pedophilia and rape.
There you go. That's what it feels like.
It's a mob. It's a gang. It's a mafia where you got the head, you got the capos, you got the streets, the soldiers, which are and then you got the suckers, which are the ones that pay tithes and offerings.
Yeah. Now think about it this way too. So here we go again. So now they had another Reverend, Gregory Ingalls, who was in California, got accused in 2013 of sexually abusing a boy. And then, but that was way back in the 70s. And then there's the statute of limitations. Essentially, he gets off the hook. What does Opus Bono do? They made him an advisor. Now, he denies it. He denies being an advisor. And that he only talked to them about canon law questions. But there's no way that that's true. I mean, it's just what I'm sorry. Like even on the outside, his name is attached to all sorts of different things in advising, and he was accused of molesting a boy, and the only reason he got out of it was because of the fact that it was statute of limitations. Other than that, he would be in jail right now.
Well, and he could hide behind his religious cult law canon, and it has an actual quote from him that says, "With Opus Bono, I only answered canon law questions that they before I had hit before I hit retirement age." What the hell? And he had it says here that in one of the lawsuits, a former altar boy said that guy forced him into hundreds of sexual abuse events, each a violation of criminal sexual penetration law. He was raping this child hundreds of times. It's no different than Jeff Epstein.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to talk about this tonight. Jeff Epsteins of the world were finally getting caught, but what are we going to do about this group? Mm-hmm. What are we doing about trying to hide all these priests? Again, this article goes into super amount of detail of how all these priests who get out of it then basically owe certain things to this group. I mean, think about it. If they help you not be convicted, are you going to feel obligated to help them? Well, they're going to force you to, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And they're going to use your money without your acknowledge to do whatever they want with it.
Exactly. They all seem to turn into theological advisors, right? Mm-hmm. All these people that get caught turn into theological advisors.
Yeah, it's almost like a proof of concept. If you let us take care of you, we'll take care. Just trust us. We got you. See our 8,000 other people that survived this. We'll take care of you. And somehow they get their funding. I don't know where the hell. That'd be interesting to see where they got that from.
Yeah. Now, supposedly the Vatican, they have a spokesperson that said that they are not in contact with this group.
Of course.
That's what they claim, right?
Of course.
And that they are aware of some of the stuff, but they are not technically in contact with the group. Now, you would think with all the power that they have, they would want to shut it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would think they would want to.
Yeah. It's, if you look at, the thing is the Vatican says they have nothing to do with them, but yet this other character in here, a former priest, Robert Keeley, he was sent by church officials in Chicago to Opus Bono for monitoring and therapy in 2003 with abused teens. After he admitted to abusing teens, and he had the approval for out-of-town trips by the Chicago Archdiocese, which is the third in command of two steps away from the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
He's there to do therapy, but he's not a therapist.
Exactly. And when you look at that, why wouldn't they hire actual therapists? Oh, that's right, because they're not part of this little group,
Well, did you see the article they found from the guy in Australia, the head archdiocese in Australia? They got busted, and he had a document that showed the 7 steps of covering up sex abuse.
No.
And and one of them was, I actually did a little episode on that. I think maybe I didn't finish that one. But it was about, one of the main things is never seek secular therapy or psychological consultation or evaluations. In-house stuff by other people, like we're talking about with Opus Bono. It's the same premise. This is just an actual physical representation of that document being carried out.
That's crazy.
Disgusting.
Yeah. If you go to their website, and I'm not going to post a link to their website. You can Google it if you want. But on their website, if you go to their about, they have a partners in missions, right? This quote is essentially their mission statement. And this is from St. John Paul II. No human sin can erase the mercy of God or prevent him from unleashing all his triumphant power if we only call on him. Indeed, sin itself makes even more radiant the love of the Father who, in order to ransom a slave, sacrificed his Son. His mercy towards us is redemption. The world looks to the priest because it looks to Jesus. Immense is the grandeur and dignity of the priest. Now,
wow,
I get why they're using that, but that quote is taken out of context. I bet you if you went to St. John Paul II and brought him back, like, hey, okay, hold on, let's have a conversation. Is this meant for you to basically say, if a priest sins, we should forgive him because he's the closest thing to God? Is that what you're saying? And if he raped a child, is it okay?
Yeah. If he rapes your child, is it okay? Not just any child. You got to make it personal.
Yeah.
That's why I always ask people questions, personal questions. Is it okay if this happened to someone? No. If it happened to you, put yourself in those shoes. Do you want them to die, suffer? Do you want them to pay? How do you want this to be handled? And that's where the real humanism needs to be put into it and say, hey, this might be someone you've never seen, never met, but it's still happening. It could happen to you too. Michigan's one of the top 5 human trafficking states in the country. So we have a real problem here. Yeah.
And one of the things, they talk about is how technically, because the Catholic Church is not part or sponsoring Opus, it doesn't have a say in it, and it doesn't want to be part of it. But it's kind of like if you and I were in bed together, boys, and I owned a farm selling dogs, and you just happen to have a bunch of kennels, and you're like, no, I raise them because I love dogs, and I'm selling dogs that are illegally bred and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, no, I just really like dogs, and if money exchanged hands, or somehow you showed up in a brand new Tesla, then you obviously, how'd you get a Tesla? You don't make any money, and you're like, oh, I don't know, it was a gift. It's the same concept here, They're benefiting the church by keeping the name of the church clean as possible, and helping relocate other members of their community instead of sending them to jail.
Yeah, God works in mysterious ways again, I guess.
These are very mysterious ways.
Very mysterious and very, I don't know, say amoral.
Yeah. Now, there's some good news that kind of comes out this. There's people that are going after this group. You know, one is the Attorney General of Michigan. So they are now investigating them, right? Which is very good. You know, I mean, if you look at their pay from 2002 to 2016, they're making $70,000 a year. Now they're making over $1.5 million a year, right? And, you know, and that's individually. So that's just crazy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I see the Michigan is investigating their nonprofit for embezzling dollars.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
And that's good, though, right? That's good because even if we can't get them to get off the path of where they're headed, we can at least get them out of the public light and dismember their group, you know, or get them to pay taxes, I guess. I guess maybe they'll get stuck paying taxes. But at least we can try and help break up this group. And I would encourage anybody, if you've never heard of Opus Bono, you should Google it. This needs to be a Netflix series right here. Maybe we should email Netflix and be like, here's a new series for you.
No, let's not. We won't email Netflix. We'll just do the documentary ourselves and we'll sell it between Netflix and Amazon Prime. That's the way to go, brother.
There you go. Then we can make a little bit of money off it. But it's disgusting.
Got a camera?
I do. But probably not a fancy enough camera, but I do have a camera. But at least people are trying to do something about it. At least people are now saying, hey, this group has done all these horrible things. I mean, we could go through this article. There is that many priests named on here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Surprising to see where they come from, too. I'd be like to see which individual ones have been to what churches or where they've shipped them to. Exactly.
Ugh, I don't know. Maybe we could put like a map together, right? That says this was an accused priest. Here's where he ended up, right? It'd be like to connect the dots.
A mitten with pins everywhere.
We'll get a big wall map and we'll do it. We'll do it like a crimes investigation podcast. There you go. Follow Father Attorney General or Father McAlades or whatever his name is, or Father Bono, or I don't know, Bono, maybe Bono. I don't know. Maybe there's a Bono. Maybe there is a priest named Bono. That'd be even worse. But anyway, maybe we should do something like that, because the amount of atrocities the Catholic Church is responsible for just continues to grow and mount and amass every single day. And this is just another example of why religion poisons everything. There you go, Hannah. Reference for you.
There you go. Omdi Domdi.
Well, I don't want to spend any more time. That's a depressing enough topic. Let's get into our quick saves for the week. So I'll go ahead. You want to go first, boys?
Sure, I'll go ahead. My quick save is an article on the sciencenews.org. It's about the art. It's called, the article is called "The Arctic is Burning and Greenland is Melting Thanks to Record Heat," and it's all about this billions of tons of ice cap that's melted off. And I think the emissions, where it goes a graph in there about carbon dioxide emissions. So from 2003 to 2019, the highest was back in 2003 with about 42 metric, I think that's megatons of CO2 emissions was the highest. And it went down, and it spiked at 2010, went down again. So 42, 43 was the highest. Now it's at almost 79 megatons, which is pretty much 2/3, 60% higher than what it was at its worst. And that's just this year. And it's only August.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, because of that melting ice in the Arctic and Greenland, it releases more CO2 quicker because it's trapped in the ice. And then we have these record droughts where now the greenhouse gases that are coming from this what's called peat moss, I guess you call it, on the Arctic and especially in Greenland where they have wildfires going on. They naturally have them anyway, but this year it started like a month earlier. And this moss can burn for months, they say, and constantly releasing more CO2. It's just this huge snowball effect. And I think it said that in Alaska, it was a record heat 90 degrees in Alaska on July 4th.
Yeah, which is crazy to think that they can even hit that up there, you know?
Yeah, the Arctic Circle.
Yeah. And people don't want to accept climate change, but here's proof. I mean, like, right here is proof that something's happening. And the question I have for any climate change deniers is, okay, tell me then what this is. What does this mean? Why are we seeing that spike, you know, in CO2 emissions? Why are we seeing, you know, spikes in temperatures, you know, that we haven't seen? Why are we seeing a steady increase? Because it's going to affect the ecosystem. It's going to affect all this wildlife. And then the wildlife, in fact, is going to, you know, let's go back to biology 101, you know, and it's just going to affect everything, which eventually will in turn affect us. You know, we may be all eating Impossible Burgers because of the fact that we can't have the same animals we used to.
Well, and that's the thing, too. I like to challenge people. They say climate change is cyclical, or it's not real, or it's a Chinese hoax, like, oh, Trumpster fired, likes to start. But you have to replace an accepted theory with another theory. You just can't say it's not that, so to hell with it. Then what else does this data mean? Everything is changing quicker and quicker and quicker, and all the ice is going away so fast. In like the last 10 years, it showed NASA had one of those grids where it shows the ice sheets expanding and contracting with the weather, but then it just keeps it's just going in a smaller and smaller direction. And polar bears are going to be extinct soon.
Yeah,
I'd imagine.
I mean, my daughter would be excited because then they won't eat seals anymore. But I like the polar bears, so
hell yeah.
Well, my quick save for the week is not as interesting as yours is. Mine's a little bit more personal, and it's only because Tool, the band Tool, with James Maynard Keenan, is having their first album release in 13 years called Fear Inoculum.
Yes.
And if anybody doesn't, you know, if you don't know who Tool is, you probably slipped under a rock. But I'm very excited for this. This is one of my first secular bands, right, that I started listening to back in the late 90s. And even though they're more mellow than a lot of the music I like, I love the intricacies and everything that they pose. I just really do. I mean, and Maynard's a little creepy. He's a little out there. He has his own vineyard, though. I mean, wouldn't that be cool to be rich enough to own your own vineyard? I don't know. Sounds cool to me.
And Andy owns a restaurant, 3 or 4 restaurants in L.A.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. He's a big food and wine snob guy. Like I think he's on Joe Rogan's podcast talking about all the different things he does. It's ridiculous. And now his wife is super business savvy, and they got a lot going on.
Yeah, I actually just added that to my, you know, I'm not a big Joe Rogan fan, but I did add that podcast specifically with Maynard in it just so I could listen to it, to hear him talk about the new album.
Well, have you listened to the new release? The one single.
Oh yeah, as soon as I found out it was coming out, I listened to it.
Yeah,
over and over again. And they released all the albums on iTunes, so I can just download this stuff now, whereas before I couldn't. So I'm excited. I hope they do a tour. Anyway, thank you all for joining us for another Cellar Door Skeptics. It's been an amazing episode. Sorry for the downer of the Catholic priest, but I thought it was important enough to have a conversation about, especially because it came out of Michigan, and I was very surprised by this. So, very, very depressing subject matter, but at least you got to hear from Boyce over at Mindful Skeptics Podcast. You can catch them every week as he does new episodes, plus video blogs and Instagram videos, and he makes fun of Trump at least 3 times a week.
Low-hanging fruit, man.
Low-hanging fruit. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptic.
Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.